The 21st century is witnessing a power struggle between the old Western order, led by the US, and emerging forces like Russia and China. With Donald Trump's return, Washington's aggressive tactics have intensified. But Moscow and Beijing are countering through strategic alliances and a shifting geopolitical landscape. Eagle Discovery will explore how this multipolar world is challenging U.S. dominance. The historical context of U.S. hegemony. During the second half of the 20th century, U.S. supremacy was built upon two fundamental pillars: military dominance and control over the global financial system. This dominance was cemented through strategic institutions established under the Bretton Woods framework, such as the International Monetary Fund, IMF, and the World Bank, which ensured the U.S. dollar became the backbone of global trade. By leveraging this financial architecture, Washington had the ability to impose economic sanctions on adversaries and reward allies, thereby shaping an international order that primarily benefited American corporations and elites. Following World War II, the United States emerged as the preeminent global power, not only due to its economic strength, but also because of its ability to project military force across multiple continents. The creation of NATO in 1949 further institutionalized U.S. influence in Europe, ensuring that Western European nations remained aligned with Washington's strategic objectives. After the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, the so-called unipolar moment allowed the U.S. to act with little resistance on the global stage. Military interventions in the Middle East, the Balkans, and North Africa, coupled with regime change campaigns in Latin America and Asia, underscored Washington's willingness to use force to maintain its geopolitical interests. However, the dawn of the 21st century marked a shift in global dynamics. China's rapid economic rise and Russia's resurgence under Vladimir Putin introduced new challenges to American hegemony. NATO's eastward expansion toward Russia's borders, despite previous assurances to Moscow that this would not occur, led to heightened tensions, culminating in conflicts such as the crisis in Ukraine. At the same time, Washington's strategy of economic containment against China, particularly in the fields of technology and trade, prompted Beijing to accelerate its push for self-reliance and expand its influence through initiatives like the Belt and Road Initiative, BRI. In response, Russia focused on strengthening its military capabilities while solidifying alliances with key partners, including China, Iran, and India. China, in turn, leveraged its vast domestic market to exert influence across Asia, Africa, and Latin America, offering an alternative development model to countries wary of Western conditionalities. Trump's return and new pressures on the global order. Donald Trump's presidency, 2017-2021, was marked by a distinct shift from multilateralism to unilateralism, characterized by aggressive economic policies, trade wars, and a retreat from global institutions. His administration prioritized America First policies, often at the expense of long-standing allies. Trump's decision to withdraw from key international agreements, including the Trans-Pacific Partnership, TPP, and the Paris Climate Accord, signaled a more isolationist approach. Upon returning to office for a second term, Trump has adopted an even more confrontational stance. His rhetoric has openly endorsed the use of military force for economic and geopolitical gain, with provocative statements about annexing Greenland, securing control over the Panama Canal, and punishing countries that challenge the dollar's dominance. These declarations, while often dismissed as political posturing, reflect a broader strategy aimed at restoring American intimidation capabilities and reinforcing global financial hegemony. However, Trump's approach has come with significant drawbacks. The U.S. network of alliances, particularly in Europe and North America, has become increasingly strained. Traditional allies, including Canada and Germany, have expressed concerns over Washington's unpredictability. Even NATO members have debated the feasibility of reducing dependence on American security guarantees, with France's calls for greater European strategic autonomy gaining traction. Moreover, Trump's continued reliance on tariffs and economic sanctions has led to unintended consequences. The excessive use of financial penalties against Russia, China, and even allies such as Germany for the Nord Stream 2 pipeline has driven many countries to seek alternatives to the U.S.-led financial system. The creation of parallel trade mechanisms, non-dollar transactions, and regional economic agreements has accelerated a shift away from Washington's traditional influence. In this context, Trump's second term has intensified global tensions rather than consolidating U.S. power. Emerging powers, particularly Russia and China, have responded by deepening their strategic partnership, expanding trade networks, and strengthening military coordination to counter Washington's pressure. The role of BRICS and the Moscow-Beijing alliance. The BRICS bloc, originally an acronym representing Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, was conceived in the early 21st century as a coalition of emerging economies with the potential to challenge Western economic dominance. Over time, this informal alliance has evolved into a more structured coalition, fostering cooperation in trade, finance, and geopolitics. One of the key developments within BRICS has been the establishment of the New Development Bank, NDB, which serves as an alternative to Western-led financial institutions like the IMF and World Bank. The NDB provides funding for infrastructure and development projects without imposing the stringent political conditions often attached to Western loans. Additionally, BRICS nations have actively pursued de-dollarization, reducing dependence on the U.S. financial system by increasing trade in local currencies. The Moscow-Beijing axis has emerged as the backbone of this coalition. Russia, with its vast energy resources and advanced military capabilities, provides strategic depth, while China, as the world's second-largest economy, offers financial muscle, industrial strength, and leadership in technological innovation. This partnership has grown significantly in response to U.S. pressures, with both nations aligning their economic and security strategies to counter Washington's influence. For example, trade between Russia and China has surged in recent years, with bilateral transactions increasingly conducted in yuan and rubles instead of dollars. Similarly, alternative financial systems, such as the Cross-Border Interbank Payment System, CIPS, have been developed as substitutes for SWIFT, reducing Washington's ability to enforce financial sanctions. While Trump's administration seeks to isolate China and Russia through economic coercion and military posturing, many emerging economies view these two powers as more reliable partners. Unlike Western financial institutions, which often impose strict political conditions on loans and investments, Russia and China have positioned themselves as pragmatic actors willing to engage in mutually beneficial deals. This has led to increased cooperation between BRICS and nations in Africa, Latin America, and Southeast Asia, further diminishing U.S. influence. Russia's response: realism and firm diplomacy. Under Vladimir Putin's leadership, Russia has adopted a strategy of political realism and firm diplomacy in response to Trump's threats and broader Western pressure. Moscow remains open to dialogue, but insists that negotiations must be based on mutual respect and recognition of its core security interests. The Kremlin frequently highlights the hypocrisy of Washington's policies, recalling that during Trump's first term, the U.S. imposed more sanctions on Russia than on any other country, despite Trump's rhetoric about improving relations. The Ukraine conflict remains a central point of contention between the two nations. While Trump blames Russia for the war and threatens further sanctions, Putin maintains that a lasting resolution requires addressing the deeper historical and geopolitical causes of the conflict. From Moscow's perspective, NATO's relentless expansion toward Russia's borders and Western support for hostile governments in Kyiv are key factors that led to the crisis. The Kremlin argues that ignoring these realities while demanding unilateral concessions from Russia will only prolong instability. Economically, Russia has demonstrated remarkable resilience in the face of sanctions, particularly since 2014. The Russian government has systematically reduced its dependence on Western financial institutions by investing in domestic agriculture, technology, and energy production. The development of Mir, Russia's alternative to Visa and MasterCard, and the SPFS financial messaging system as a substitute for SWIFT, has helped Russia circumvent many of the financial restrictions imposed by Washington. Additionally, Moscow has strengthened trade relations with China, India, and other non-Western nations, further insulating itself from economic coercion. As a result, while the U.S. continues to rely on sanctions and tariffs as its primary tools of pressure, their effectiveness has diminished. New restrictions on Russia's economy, once capable of causing severe disruptions, now have a limited impact as Moscow deepens its economic integration with alternative markets. China's pivotal role, an economic force that confounds Trump. China's economic power presents the most formidable challenge to U.S. global dominance. As the world's second-largest economy and the largest in terms of purchasing power parity, Beijing plays a decisive role in countering Washington's coercive tactics. China's vast manufacturing base, advanced technological sector, and expansive global trade networks make it a central player in the world economy, limiting the effectiveness of U.S. sanctions and trade restrictions. Trump's attempts to contain China through punitive tariffs and technology bans have backfired in several ways. Many American companies depend on Chinese supply chains for manufacturing, while U.S. consumers rely on affordable Chinese imports. Efforts to block Chinese tech giants like Huawei and TikTok have led Beijing to accelerate its development of independent alternatives, including domestic semiconductor production and financial payment systems. Furthermore, Trump's trade war has inadvertently driven China to expand its use of non-dollar transactions. As U.S. sanctions increase, Beijing has doubled down on its efforts to internationalize the yuan, encouraging trade agreements in local currencies and reducing reliance on Western-controlled financial infrastructure. The expansion of China's cross-border interbank payment system, CIPS, as an alternative to SWIFT underscores this shift. Additionally, China's Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, has played a crucial role in reshaping global trade dynamics. By investing in infrastructure projects across Asia, Africa, and Latin America, Beijing has provided an attractive alternative to Western development financing, often criticized for its political conditions. Many nations view China as a more reliable economic partner, further undermining Washington's influence. While Trump continues to escalate his anti-China rhetoric, Beijing's economic strategy remains largely focused on long-term stability and pragmatic cooperation with its partners. Rather than engaging in direct confrontation, China seeks to strengthen its economic alliances and expand its global trade footprint, ensuring that it remains indispensable to the world economy despite Washington's pressures. The fracturing of Western alliances, an opportunity for Russia and China. One of the unintended consequences of Trump's foreign policy is the growing discontent among U.S. allies. Washington's aggressive economic tactics, combined with unilateral decision-making, have strained relationships with the European Union, Canada, and even long-standing partners in Asia. European leaders, for instance, have expressed frustration over Trump's disregard for transatlantic cooperation. His proposal to buy Greenland from Denmark was met with widespread ridicule, while threats to impose high tariffs on European products have deepened tensions between Washington and Brussels. France and Germany, in particular, have increasingly advocated for greater European strategic autonomy, including efforts to reduce reliance on U.S. military protection and economic policies. Similarly, Trump's unpredictable approach to trade with Canada and Mexico has raised concerns about U.S. reliability as a partner. His threats to renegotiate or withdraw from trade agreements, including the USMCA, have fueled uncertainty in North America's economic relationships. This fractured Western unity presents a major opportunity for Russia and China. As Trump isolates U.S. allies through aggressive policies, Moscow and Beijing are actively promoting alternative frameworks for cooperation. China's expansion of the Belt and Road Initiative and Russia's leadership in energy partnerships offer attractive alternatives to countries seeking economic stability without Washington's intervention. Moreover, the emergence of new trade corridors, such as the International North-South Transport Corridor, INSTC, further weakens U.S. dominance over global trade. By providing alternative transportation routes linking Asia, Europe, and the Middle East, Russia and China are reducing global dependence on U.S.-controlled maritime routes, enhancing their geopolitical influence. De-dollarization and resistance to U.S. tariff imperialism. A cornerstone of U.S. global power has long been the dominance of the dollar as the world's reserve currency. However, Trump's aggressive use of financial warfare, threatening 100% tariffs on countries that bypass the dollar system, has accelerated global efforts to reduce reliance on U.S. financial instruments. In response to Washington's unilateral sanctions, Russia, China, and other emerging powers have intensified their push for de-dollarization. This process involves increasing trade in local currencies, developing alternative financial payment systems, and reducing exposure to U.S. monetary policies. For instance, Russia and China have significantly expanded bilateral trade in rubles and yuan, bypassing the dollar entirely. The BRICS bloc has also explored the creation of a common reserve currency to reduce dependence on the U.S. financial system. Meanwhile, Iran and Turkey have engaged in similar efforts to conduct trade outside the dollar framework, further eroding its hegemony. Additionally, Moscow and Beijing have worked to establish financial networks independent of the U.S.-led SWIFT system. Russia's SPFS and China's CIPS serve as alternatives for international financial transactions, diminishing Washington's ability to impose economic penalties. As more countries seek to insulate themselves from U.S. sanctions, the dollar's role as the de facto global currency is increasingly being challenged. Despite Trump's attempts to reinforce U.S. financial dominance, his policies have ultimately encouraged greater resistance to American economic influence. By weaponizing the dollar and using tariffs as a tool of coercion, Washington has accelerated the rise of a multipolar financial system, one in which alternative currencies and independent financial institutions play a greater role. Trump's second term underscores the limits of U.S. imperialist policies in a radically changed global landscape. Far from being intimidated by sanctions and military threats, Russia and China have used the situation to strengthen alliances, build independent financial and commercial networks, and integrate more economies into a more equitable global project. The belief that the old unipolar order, upheld by the dollar and U.S. military force, is no longer sustainable is gaining traction. In response, Moscow and Beijing offer a vision based on mutual benefit and national sovereignty, presenting a powerful counterweight to the White House's dominance attempts. Ultimately, the determination of Russia and China to counter Trump's expansionist policies rests on economic resilience, strategic alliances, and measured diplomacy, while the U.S. finds itself entangled in internal dilemmas and global conflicts. This turning point marks a historic shift, signaling the decline of U.S. leadership as it was known after World War II and the rise of an emerging bloc rewriting the geopolitical rules of the game.